What would you do, or whom would you want to meet if you get a chance to travel back in time or to your future? Hey, this is me Nivya, and today I'm going to speak about two books by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, Before the Coffee Gets Cold and its sequel, Tales from the Cafe. There's a cafe named Funicula in Tokyo which does not just serve their customers with snacks and coffee but also allows them to travel back in time or to their future. But there are a set of rules. Rule number 1. You can only travel once back in time or to your future. Rule number 2. There is only one seat in the cafe which allows you to time travel. And that seat is often occupied by a lady. Only when she willingly goes to the washroom, you get to sit in that particular seat and time travel. Rule number 3. Once you're in your past or future, you cannot leave that seat. If you leave the seat, you'll be transported back to the present. Rule number 4. You can only meet people who have visited this cafe before if you're traveling back in time. But if you're traveling to your future, then that person needs to come and meet you in this cafe. Fifth rule, which is a major one. You will be served with a coffee before you time travel. You need to definitely come back to your present before the coffee gets cold, or otherwise be ready to face a consequence, and the consequence is definitely an interesting but not a good one. Go and read the book to understand what that consequence is. In spite of following all these rules, there's one catch here. Whatever action you do in your past by time traveling will not change your present. Even after knowing this and knowing that there is a consequence you need to face if you do not come back to your present before the coffee gets cold, there are 8 people who time travel in these two books, like 4 each. 4 people time travel in Before the Coffee Gets Cold and 4 people in Tales from the Cafe. So why do they time travel? Before we drill down to the 8 stories of the customers, let me know through the comment section, if you got to time travel back in past, whom would you want to meet? Or what would you do if there is just one condition, and that is that the present will not change. It will still remain intact. Like for example, I do recall a few moments wherein I was silent and where I should have, expressed my views or just countered back with some statements. I was silent then, thinking that, it will hit me back in the future. But anyways, the present is not going to change, right? So I would go back in past and then just speak out. So if it's not too personal, let me know through the comment sections what you would do. In the first book, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, there are 4 customers who time travel. The first one, Fumiko, a lady who travels back in time to meet her ex before he travels for a job in US from Tokyo. The next customer who time travels is a lady who wants to meet her husband, who is in the initial stage of Alzheimer's, and she wants to find a letter. So all the stories are very beautiful. This is my favorite one because it reminds us that Alzheimer's will affect the spouse and near ones as much as the patient himself or herself. The third customer who travels back in time is a girl who meets her sister, whom she has been avoiding since some time. And the last story in Before the Coffee Gets Cold is the only story wherein the customer travels to the future. A lady who travels to the future in order to see her unborn daughter. Now going to the second book, Tales from the Cafe, we have a man who travels back in time to meet his friend who has passed away in order to record a message. Then we have a son who travels back in time to meet his dead mother whose funeral he could not attend. And then we have an old man who travels back in time to meet his dead wife. And in this book also we have one person who travels to the future, a man who travels to the future to meet his lover. By now you would have understood that these 2 books are an amalgamation of all emotions and relationships, love, loss, grief, guilt, friendship, everything. If you're planning to read both the books, go with the book Before the Coffee Gets Cold first and then read the second book, Tales from the Cafe. But if you're not planning to read both the books, then you can read it like standalones as well. You can read Tales from the Cafe first, no problem. I personally like the stories from Before the Coffee Gets Cold than Tales from the Cafe because at certain instances I felt it boring while I was reading Tales from the Cafe, which did not happen at all while I was reading the first book. In Before the Coffee Gets Cold, it's not just the past or the future stories, like it's not about the customers alone, but it's also about the present story which is happening in the cafe, which is quite interesting. There's also a movie made based on the first book named Cafe Funiculi Funicula, which I haven't seen yet. It's a Japanese movie. I listened to these two books via audiobooks. So the first book, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, I read it or I listened to it via Storytel, while the second book, Tales from the Cafe, I listened it via Audible. If you're planning to read only one out of these two books, then I would undoubtedly suggest you to pick up Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I loved everything about this book. Only the names were quite confusing in this book, but apart from that, I loved everything. With that, this is me, Navya, signing off. Keep reading a lot of books. Until we meet next time, bye, take care, happy reading.